Morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. Hope you're having a great day so far. And sorry for the delay, I was trying to get things set up. But we'll go ahead and get started. Last week we created this so far. So a bunch of environmental elements, the trees, the water as well. Hopefully we can wrap up this scene. We're going to create the rest of the environmental objects, the barrel, add some lighting materials, and wrap this up. And let's get started. So I believe last time we ended up creating one of these grass objects. I think we're going to skip this one for now. So there's two types, but we're gonna skip this one. We're just gonna go ahead and start creating the snow, and then the barrel as well. And if we have some time left over, we'll create the other grass type. But for the barrel, let's go ahead and add our 3D cursor next to the steps here. And I'm just gonna add a cylinder. I'll change this to 16. And we'll scale that down, bring it up. Just position it a little bit nicely. And I will make it slightly taller. And we're gonna be working, setting the origin point to median, or the pivot point to median. So make sure you set that in your settings. Let me just turn on hotkeys. Okay, once you've done that, let's go into edit mode. And we're gonna create these wooden panels first. So let's select this whole loop. That's Alt left click on one of these. You should select the whole thing. And we're gonna do extrude faces. Extrude individual faces here. Extrude it out slightly. And then we're gonna add some loop cuts. Let's add Let's add 4. So once you've done that, select the top and bottom ones. These are gonna make up the top and bottom metal parts here. So let's do scale Z, and we're just going to bring it out to the edges. My bad. I think we might have to do this before we actually make the wooden panels. So let's just Control Z that, and we're gonna make the 4 loop cups first. And then just bring those out. And then for these, let's also bring it out to roughly where those metal parts will be. And then once you've done that, we're going to use the same tool and create 2 more cuts for each one of these. So do Control B, pull it out, And then with the face select, or I guess you can just keep it in the same select mode, we're going to scale these out a little bit. So if you press S and scale it out on the horizontal axis, so that's Shift Z, and we'll create one more loop cut here in the middle and scale that out as well. And before we do that, let's turn on proportional editing for just this middle one and scale that out so that it looks a bit more natural. And once you've gotten to this point, we're going to select the top and bottom faces of this barrel. So I'm just going to isolate this view by hitting numpad / and just scale this down, and I'm going to turn off proportional editing. Scale these down so it has a nice curve when we're looking from the side. And then from here, let's select these 4 loops, the metal parts we just created. And I'm just using Alt mouse click to select the whole loop. And then we're going to extrude along normals. And I'm noticing the top and bottom faces are looking a little wonky, so I'm just gonna scale them up and down on the Z-axis. And then from here, let's select the wooden panels that will be created. So just loop select these 4 loops, and we're going to extrude individual faces. And I'm just gonna shade smooth and auto smooth. Okay, at this point, I think the modeling portion's done. We're just gonna tweak it slightly. It does look a bit taller in my reference image, so I'm just gonna make this taller. And I'm going to shrink the bottom faces a little bit more. So select the top and bottom faces, turn on proportional editing, and we're just going to decrease this along the X and Y. And the metal parts have to protrude out a little bit more, so I'm just gonna select these 4 loops and scale them out. Before I do that, let's turn off proportional editing again. The hotkey for this is O. Oh, it's not. It is. Yes, it is O actually. So turn that off. And let's scale it out. We want these to be coming out compared to the wooden panels. Okay, once that's done, let's go back to the original view. Just take a look at it. Pull it out from the ground a little. It's looking very similar. I'm just gonna make it slightly taller. And then let's duplicate that, create another one right next to it. And I'm gonna scale this one down. Place it on the ground. Position it like so. So that are our two barrels. I did tweak the scene slightly before the session, and you'll notice the trees are slightly taller than before. The house is also slightly taller. And now we will, before we do anything else, let's add the camera to this. And I did attach the plugin in Discord, so if you haven't already, feel free to download that. And let me just walk you through how you'll be adding it. Okay, so once you've downloaded that folder, go to File, Edit, Preferences, and then in the Add-ons tab here, you're gonna hit Install, and just navigate to where that file is. In my case, it is in Downloads, and I haven't unzipped it yet, so I'm just gonna unzip it. So I'm going to Downloads. It's called Create ISOCAM. Yeah, so here, and you just want to load this file, the Python file. And once you hit Install Add-on, you're going to see it in this list. If you don't, just hit or just search ISO and check this box, make sure it's enabled. And once you do, you should be able to see an additional tab on the right of your viewport, left to your layers list. It's called ISOCAM. And we're going to create I believe this is a game ISOCAM. Let me just double check. Yeah, so just hit the second option here, game ISOCAM. And you should see this box that represents the camera. And your default resolution, just change that to 4:3. Actually, let's change that to 1:1. So 1600. And your render might not be perfectly fitted like this image here. So let's just pull it up. You can do that by selecting this camera box here. You'll see the orange outline. And then just hit GZ, move it up. And then for the these ISO cams, the orthographic cameras, you need to tweak this scale to zoom in and out. So that's in the camera, the object data properties panel, and just decrease this to a comfortable number. I'll do 12.5. Maybe pull it up slightly. When I create these renders, I like to have even spacing around the sides. So for example, the left and right would be the same. The top and bottom would be roughly the same too. I'll change that to 12 actually. So from this point on, when we create any objects in the scene, we'll be checking it with the camera, in the camera view. We could have done this from the start, but I just wanted to introduce camera a little bit later in this render. But from now on, you can always hit numpad 0 and that will take you to the camera view. Hitting it again, it would take you to the previous view. I think any major objects have been created. We're gonna go ahead and create the snow on the ground and the wood panels here. So how I did that, oh, before we do, let's actually make the terrain slightly yeah, let's give it a little bit more variation. So I'm just going to select the ground object here, go into edit mode, and let's turn on proportional editing again. And this time we're going to select random. So let's select some of these vertices on the ground. I won't be touching anything below the house. I'm just gonna be touching the ones that are around the pond and anywhere where there's environmental elements. So the trees, the rocks, the grass. I'm just gonna click on a few of these. And just multiple select, so shift clicked. So you have about 10 to 15 selected, like me. And we're going to change these on the Z axis. So just increase this area of influence, and once you're comfortable with this, we're just going to either push it up or down. I'm gonna push it down. Maybe a little bit more. And I think if you make changes to the terrain on the edges, that makes the most difference, because in the middle you won't be seeing it from the camera view as much, but on the edges you can tell that there's a curve here. So I tend to make more changes on the sides. Okay, once you've done that, let's go ahead and apply subdivision to this. If you see any of the water floating from the ground, we'll have to pull that back down. And this time I'm gonna turn off proportional editing. Pull it down. Just make sure that your water's touching the ground there. Okay, once you've done that, let's go ahead and actually let's shade smooth first and auto smooth. And we're going to try to get rid of these artifacts by applying a subdivision modifier. So go to your modifiers panel, subdivision. Let's increase this a little. 3 for myself. And you'll notice the curves are, the artifacts on the ground are gone, but the edges are a little too curved now. So we want to fix that. Let's go into edit mode. The bottom layer, we've hidden that before, so let's unhide. Just hit Alt H, unhide that, and we're gonna create loop cuts around the edge. So create one here. And then just move this outwards. And you'll notice the edge gets sharper. You're gonna have to leave a little bit of room here, but this much. And we're just gonna do that for all 4 sides. So this side as well. Let's do it for over here. And lastly, this side. If I wanted to, I could create one more along this and just pull it up, because I'm noticing that if you look at this corner, it's even along the edges that we've just fixed, but not on the side. So the rounded corner is looking a little wonky to me, at least. And I could just pull this up, fix that easily. So you get a nice slight rounded corner along the edges. And then from this point, feel free to tweak the terrain further. I'm feeling like there's less curves than I thought, so I'm just gonna add a bit more variation. And before you do, make sure you hide the bottom layer again. Before we do anything, let me I think I've messed up this part of it. So when you add this loop cut on the edge, along the sides, make sure you don't make it go over the water, the surface of the water, or the top edge loop there. You want to keep this loop above or below the surface loop. Okay, and then I'm just going to hide the bottom vertices. Going into wireframe mode, side view, and hit H again. And I'm just going to tweak these curves further. And of course, hit proportional editing. If you want to add more variation, just increase this with your scroll wheel. I wouldn't go too crazy though. If you increase it too much, that's gonna affect the whole terrain, and I don't want that. I just want to affect around the house and the pond. And now that you've done that, there's gonna be grass and rocks hiding underneath the ground, or maybe it's floating above the ground, and we're gonna need to fix that. So from here, I'm just going to select everything that was supposed to be on the ground. So that's the mushroom, trees, grass, rocks. Anything related to the pond, we're gonna deselect. And also for the trees, let's deselect the actual tree leaves. We're just gonna select the trunk because we've parented all the other layers to the trunk. So just select the trunks, the mushrooms on the ground, the rocks, the grass. And how I'm doing this, I'm hitting Shift to add to my selection and then Control to remove. So it makes it easier to select things. Okay, once you've done that, I'm gonna turn on Snap. And hopefully you have the same settings as last time. Face, center, rotation to target. And once you hit G, actually this might not work. Apologies. We'll have to do this manually, which is kind of a hassle. So I remember talking about this last time, but if you select multiple and hit G, it's gonna take the average of it and place everything at that average. And if you want to do individual projection, you're gonna have to do these individually. So I guess next time, if we wanted to make the terrain changes, that would be at the very beginning. That's a mistake on my part. But you want these curves done and then have these environmental objects laid out. Thankfully, it's not too hard to put these back. So just select each one, hit G, and then if you move your mouse slightly, it's just gonna correct that, and you can click. If you do see anything sticking inside the ground or things like that, you might want to rotate and fix it. And I'm just gonna do it for every single one here, just because it might not seem like it might seem like they're on the ground, but they're actually not. So I'm just gonna make sure they are. Same with the barrels. Barrels, we will do this manually afterwards. We haven't adjusted the pivot point. And I'm just checking if there's anything here. I'm seeing 5 rocks. I'll give you a few more minutes to tweak that. Once you're done, make sure you adjust the barrel too. For this one, we can put the pivot point on the base, or you could just shift it down. Doesn't really matter at this point because in the camera view, it'll look roughly the same. If you do have a lot of clipping happening here, you might want to do that. And to do so, we just want to select the bottom face of the barrel, Shift S, cursor to selected, and then just move your origin to 3D cursor. And you're just pulling that to the base. And now when you move this, make sure you have snapping on. It's going to rotate. Same with this one. And if it's on a weird slope like this, then maybe you want to move it to the left instead, or somewhere that's flat. Thanks for the sub, BAF0. Hopefully I read that right. Okay, hopefully you're done by this point. We're gonna go ahead and create the snow on the ground. Oh, and I just discovered that you can scroll into this, or scroll left and right. Okay, let's go ahead and create the snow. Select your ground plane, and with face select selected, turn off these tools that we had on. We're going to select the faces where we want the snow to be. So that would be, in my image, I have them around the environmental objects, so nothing that overlaps with it. In this case, I'm just going to select, yeah, this side, there's a lot of empty space, so let's just select a few of these tiles. And just to show you what I'm selecting, I'm gonna select in wireframe view, and then also select a few here. And make sure you're selecting in different sections with gaps between it. Otherwise, you're just gonna have one big connected snow layer, which won't look good. So let's do the ground first, and then we'll add the snow on the rocks and the wood later. Okay, for me it's gonna be these tiles. For you it's gonna look different depending on how you placed your objects. Okay, by now, hopefully you're done. We're gonna do Shift D, just duplicate those tiles. Press Enter, don't move them. Actually, if you did want to confirm that selection exactly where it is, you might want to do right mouse click or escape. Enter would actually, so if I did Shift D and move this slightly, hit the left mouse click or enter, that would confirm that change location. So just to just to ensure that we're placing it on the right exact spot where it used to be, just hit escape, and you're gonna cancel any movement that you might have made. Okay, from here I'm gonna go back to solid view and to object mode. Oh, actually, I don't think I separated the selection. Let's go back. If you haven't changed your selection, it should be selected. If you have, you'll have to go ahead and select these again. Hopefully you haven't. But from this state, let's hit P, separate selection. And then let's go ahead and select that layer we just created. And from here, we're going to add one more modifier, and that's the Solidify one. So go to your modifiers. Make sure Solidify is first above Subdivision. And let's just change the offset to 1. Well, what you're doing, that's just changing the way the object is extruding, or just changing the direction. Before it was going towards the ground, now we're just pulling it up towards the sky. Then let's check even thickness and just make this to 0.1. And we might have to reset scale. So just hit Control A, scale. And it should be looking somewhat like this. And you'll notice some of you might have the snow floating above the ground. If that's the case, just pull it down slightly. I'm just looking at this. Maybe the two tiles that I've selected here, it's looking a bit awkward, so I'm just gonna delete it. I'd say 2, 3 and up would be good, and if it's just one long strip, that might look weird because snow doesn't really land like that. It would be in chunks. So if you wanted to add more snow, you can always go ahead and create more by selecting the ground tiles again, doing what we just did. Okay, let's do that for the barrels as well. Select both barrels, go into edit mode, and select the top faces for them. Okay, let's duplicate, escape, and then separate that. Okay, and once you've done that, we just want to copy over the modifiers from the snow. So make sure you select one of these. In Blender, you can keep clicking on the same location and it'll select whatever's in that at that point, because there's the Z in 3D and you want to make sure that you're clicking on the right object, so you can tell by the outlines. So make sure this top face is outlined, and then select one of the snow parts here, and you just want to copy over the modifier. So there's a key hotkey for that, Control L. And then here it says copy modifiers, just do that. And it's gonna copy over the snow modifiers to this top face here. And it's also floating a little bit. We could avoid the floating by offsetting it by 0. So you know how when we created the snow, we had to pull it down. If you leave it at 0, it's just gonna sit right on the face. So maybe that was a better way to do the snow. And then from here, I want to... Let me just move the origin to geometry for the snow. I wanted to cover the whole plane here, so I'm just going to increase it in scale. And if you look at the reference image, it looks a bit puffy on the top. So we're just going to add more thickness to this. Let's say 0.3. Okay, let's do the same thing for this barrel. So select the top face, duplicate it, P to separate. And then this time we're gonna copy these modifiers because we did tweak the values a little bit. So make sure you have this one selected first and then select this one afterwards. Control L, copy, and let's scale this after we reset the origin point to geometry. So what I'm trying to do here is you'll notice that the shape is following the barrel, which is good, but since it's snow, we want it to look a bit smoother. So what I'm gonna do is select, actually let's select both, and then hit A to select both faces. And let's inset it slightly so it looks rounder. And then the thickness, we'll have to bring it back down to let's say I'll do 0.15. So just make sure you're doing that for both. And then if you wanted to change the scale, do that as well. Okay, next we'll create some snow on the wooden panels and the steps. So here we haven't added any loop cuts. I didn't add snow on the inside because that's probably, the snow is covered by the roof, and I just wanted to add some along the outside. And we can do that by adding a loop cut to one of these and just pull it out. Like so. And before you apply any modifiers, if you wanted to make a backup, please do that. I have talked about this before, but once you've applied a modifier, there's no going back. I don't know if I don't have a backup folder. So what I usually do, if I had to create this for a client, I would copy this, leave it in place, and I would do move to collection and just create a backup folder, a backup collection. And then this one, I would just deselect so that it's not showing in the scene. You're not able to edit that at all. So anything that needs to be applied as a or any of the modifiers need to be applied, I just copy that into this folder so that I don't have to worry about losing those objects. For now, I don't need to do that, but that is how you would do it. And then now that we've done this, let's apply Bevel and Array. And usually I tend to apply from the top first because that's the order of how the modifiers are applying to the object. So if you applied it differently in a different order, it might look a bit weird. If I had to give an example, it would be the snow. So if I apply subdivision first and then apply this, it's not going to look the same. So when you apply modifiers, make sure you're applying from the top first. So in this case, I don't think it matters too much because there are two modifiers that won't affect each other, but just to make sure, I'm going to apply from the top. And there's Control A, which you can do in object mode. Actually, you do have to do it in object mode. So let's go back and hit Control A or the first item on the drop-down menu and just apply both of them. And once you've done that, you'll notice that the same loop cut kind of shows along all of them. And maybe we want some variation to how far the snow is going in. Let's just copy a few of these. Let's duplicate a few. I'm just gonna select the ones that aren't overlapping with the wooden poles here. So just selecting the two here, one here. And I won't bother doing the back because we will be seeing that. This is where the camera view comes in handy. If you select this and look at the camera view, you'll notice that it's not in view. So there's no need to create another layer for that. It's just gonna add to your render time. In the future, if you say you want to do renders from all four sides of this, then maybe you want to do that. But for myself, I've just been rendering out this view, the front view. So I won't bother doing the back. And once you've done that, let's duplicate it and separate it out. Shift D to duplicate, P to separate. And then from here, I'm just gonna tweak the position of some of these because snow is never this uniform. Maybe I'll snap to surface first and then just pull some of these in. Pull some of these inwards, pull some of these out, and just tweak the location of where your snow will be. Do that for this side as well. Okay, once you're happy with what you have, let's tab out, go to object mode, and we will select the snow on top of the barrel, and we're gonna copy over the modifiers from here. So Control L, copy modifiers. And the reason why it's looking weird is probably because of scale value. Oh, it's not. Let me see. Yeah, it's not affected by scale. So we just need to tweak these values manually. Let's decrease the thickness to 0.5, 0.6, depending on how puffy you want them. I'll just do 0.6 for now. And we're gonna have to add another modifier here. Let's add a bevel modifier and pull this up before subdivision. And then you'll notice that these snow layers become a bit more square. So what I've done, if I had to explain what's happening here, subdivision, it takes the 4 or whatever vertices in the object and tries to create curves out of them. So if I had to remove the bevel to show you, so without the bevel, it's just it's trying to curve from 4 points and making it more like creating more geometry so that it will look a bit more round, and then Solidify will add more depth to it. Bevel, you're actually beveling these 4 edges. So when I turn this on, okay, I might have done something here. What have I done? I'm not sure what happened there, but it's not working as I expected. Anyways, if I feel like these snow layers look a little too rounded, that's what I would do. I would add the bevel. Oh, okay. Now I remember. You would have to add the bevel before subdivision. So what you're doing is when you add the bevel before, you're just adding more geometry to this layer and then subdividing that. So that's a tip if you wanted to add more geometry to a subdivision. Just place bevel beforehand. It won't work in all cases, but for this one it does. And from here you could I know Adam put a screenshot in the chat. You could add more geometry to this and tweak it further. So for example, if I feel like these are too square, you could leave it circular by removing the bevel modifier, or you could just add some loop cuts here and then tweak that even further, like so. Just so it doesn't look too uniform. But yeah, that's something you can do. I'm not gonna do this right now, but I will tweak just high level how it looks a little. Okay, so now that we have that, you can do the same thing for these steps. You'll notice in my image, I've added more geometry and did the tweaks, which looks a lot more natural rather than this. Like these, you'll see there's corners to the snow, which might happen in real life because this is a square panel. But if you wanted to add more variety, just go through that process that I've shown you. Let's go ahead and do that for the steps too. I'm gonna select these 2 objects and create loop cuts. Let's do 3 here and 2 here. And I'm just gonna copy these 4 planes and escape. P selection. And with these selected, let's select the snow layer that we just tweaked and Control L, copy modifier. Yeah, let me know if you need a break in the chat, but otherwise I'll continue. And this one, again, just tweak the location of these 4 points. For this one, I'll just pull it out in the middle. Same for these 2. And to me, these look a bit too puffy. For you, it might be okay. I'm just gonna tweak the value here. But this is the creative process. If you feel like it's not looking great, feel free to tweak that and make it your own. Okay, cool. So we've gotten to this point. We're going to, since we have about an hour left, we're gonna jump into materials and lighting. So if you haven't already, there is a list of hex values in the channel. So refer to that when you create these. Let me see if I can put this on the stream directly so you don't have to keep looking back and forth between 2 windows. Okay, so I'm just gonna add this onto my window. Hopefully you can see that. If not, I'll just copy it in the channel once again, or just scroll up a little bit, you'll see it. So adding materials, we've done it a fair bit in the past. Let me just delete these. Okay, so just going from the top, there's background here on the very top. And when we're adding materials, let's switch over to material preview. Okay, so the background layer, which is this here, the background square, I'm gonna hit new. And then base color will be this. And if you want to rename these, feel free to do that. I'll just rename mine, background, and then ground, new, rename this to ground, and change the base color. Grass, which is this. Grass, base color. And it might have been good if we created link duplicates, which is basically duplicating it how we've done before by doing Shift S. but instead you're linking them so that materials are the same. And that's something that I always forget to do. If you wanted to do that, there is a duplicate objects. Duplicate linked, which is Alt-D. So once you do that, you'll notice it duplicates the material as well. So if I change this to another color, it's just gonna change it all together. You can think of it as like a design system, like they're the same component if you link duplicates. But there is another way to just do that manually by selecting all the grass layers. Oh, and I have a hidden rock layer here. Okay, so just select all your grass objects. And make sure you deselect anything that you might have selected accidentally. Okay, and then lastly, select that layer you just changed. Control L, copy link materials. That's the third option. Thanks for the follow, Last to Smile. And then let's go ahead and go down this list again. Tree. So when I say tree, that's the green part of it. So let's select the 3 layers here. So leave the snow layer on top. Select the bottom ones. Same with these two. And again, this would have been much easier if we linked the duplicates, but we didn't. And then just add a material. I'm gonna call that tree. And I'm gonna change the base color to this. And since we have these selected, we can just do Control L, link materials. And we're gonna do that for the tree trunk as well. So let's do tree trunk. And I'm just gonna copy the hex value. Put it in here. And then Control L, link materials. And I did tree trunks and steps as the same color. That's why there's a slash steps behind. So let's do that for these wooden panels here. Select the steps, the plane here, and the poles as well. I'm sure there's best practices around this to coloring without selecting these manually. This is just how I do it. You can select tree trunk here, or you can create another material with the same hex value. Link materials. Let's say you wanted to differentiate the color between the two. You want to make it similar but slightly different. You could just create another material out of this. So just duplicate it using this button here. And then rename this to wood, or maybe steps. And then from there you would have to relink these again. So Control L, link materials. And then you'll notice these are all steps. This is tree trunk. And then from there you can tweak the value on this if you wanted to make it lighter or darker or change the color even. Same with the barrels. I'm going to select both barrels, select the steps, Control L, link material. And then I realized I didn't include this value, but the metal part in this scene, that would be 999. So let me just add that here. So with these two selected, yeah, let's do plus new. Just gonna name this metal. Base color will be 999. Another tip, if you have to enter 6 digits that are the same, you can just do the first 3. Maybe even the first 2. Okay, not the first 2. The first 3, it'll just copy all that into 6, and then from here we would have to apply that to the metal bits of it. So I'm just gonna select the loop here, and then we're gonna have to add these edges too, which you could manually select, but I'm just gonna do Control plus on my numpad, and that's gonna increase my selection. And then from here, since this is 2 barrels, we're gonna have to apply them separately. So if I do metal, apply. Oh, okay, it did do it together. Just make sure both of them have this metal, and then you can apply it. Metal as the second material, not the... So it has to be separated. And then I believe the top... Yeah, the top face is not colored. Oh, I guess it could remain just wood. So let's leave it like that. And go down the list again, rocks. So that's 666. Select all your rocks in the scene, including the ones around the pond. Also the one here, and the one that has the sauna icon. I'm gonna create a new material. I'm gonna call that rocks. And I'm gonna change the color to 444. Or sorry, 666. And then just link materials. For the rocks, I want to create less glossiness for them. And if you remember from the previous render, roughness, that's the value you have to change the glossiness of an object. So you'll see if I change the roughness to 0, it's fully glossy. But then if I change it to 1, it's matte. So I'm just gonna change this to 0.75. And that should change all the objects' material because they have the same material applied. So don't worry about going to each one and trying to change that. It's gonna be the same. And then let's go to our rock icon. That's this here. That's this icon. So obviously you can name it differently. Apply that, and then we'll go over to the mushroom base, E7D1A4. This one we'll have to apply the base first, so mushroom base And then mushroom roof. Let's do slash, isolate the view. And then for me, I have enough separation here, so I could just go into wireframe view and select these like so. But you'll get some overlap here in some cases. So I'll just, what I'm gonna do is select the top face and then just press Ctrl+ until I've reached the end of this roof. So like that. I believe mushroom, like the inside might be lighter, so you could leave it like this too. I'm just gonna color the whole thing. Let's add another material and call it mushroom roof or red, and then just copy over the hex value. E71616. And if you create another material in one object, you have to assign it. You're assigning it to the selection. So assign, and I'm in solid view, so I can't see that. Okay, and then once you've done that, let's move on to mushroom spot, which is the white spots on the roof. And they are a separate material, so I'm just gonna have to select these manually. And then mushroom spot. Control L, link. And we're gonna have to do that for these, which is kind of a hassle to do. I'm thinking we can just create one and then duplicate them again. I think that would be faster. So let's delete your, I mean, you can do this in your own time too. I'll just show you how you can create linked duplicates. So I'm just gonna delete all the mushrooms I had in the scene. And I'm going to this one here. And I'm going to add mushroom base first. Now that we have the materials created already, we don't have to create them again. You just need to select them from the drop down here. So mushroom base first. I'm gonna add another slot, mushroom roof. And you're gonna have to apply that, that doesn't change. So I'm just gonna select these here and select mushroom roof here, assign. And then for these spots, they're joined as one material, one object. So we're gonna have to select these, and that's hover and L on your keyboard. So hover over the object, hit L. And once you've covered everything, just gonna add another slot, mushroom spot, and assign. Okay, and then from this point, you're just gonna copy and scale based on the image reference. Make sure you have snapping on. So Control D, scale down. And sorry, if you wanted to do link duplicates, at this point, it doesn't really matter because we've applied the materials, but just to show you what that is, Alt D. So there's Shift D for just regular duplicating and Alt D for linking those duplicates. So I'm just gonna place these around the scene again. Forgot to delete these two. And of course, as you're doing this, you can add variation to height, scale, rotation. When you're doing a rotation, make sure so it's just rotating along the axis, but it's not gonna stick to the ground, as like the snapping won't apply. So make sure you just snap it again. And then let's go to the right side. I have 3 here. And then 1 here. And then for the wooden doors, I'm noticing a big gap here, which we'll leave for now. But let's go ahead and select the wooden door and the windows. And then let's add a new material. Call that wood door. And I'm going to change the color to AC2529. And then just link the materials. These two are separate, so I'm just going to have to do that again. Yeah, and I'm noticing a big gap here, so I might have to change that so there's less of a gap between the panels. It's gonna be tough. There's gonna be some manual tweaking that I'll have to do in my own time. But I'll leave that for now. Wooden doors, windows is that, and then emission. This is the light that's coming out of the window. So this here. I see it's coming out of the door too. Let me see if we can, okay. Okay, maybe we don't need to tweak the wood panels just yet. Let's add the lighting first. So light from windows, just copy that hex code and let's apply it to these two first. So select the window and the door frame, hit slash, and then let's add a new material, hit new, and then let's do house light. And for this one, it's an emission shader. It's a different shader altogether. So for that, you're gonna go to under this drop down here, emission, change the color to the hex value that was provided, and then change the strength to 100. Once you've done that, we just need to apply it to the surface that emits light. So select just the base surface here. So whatever's within the frame, you should select. And just the front side is good. Just select the front facing faces here. Assign. And then you're gonna have to do that for this side too. Because they're two separate objects, you'll have to do it twice. If these were linked duplicates, it would have been much easier, but linked duplicates only apply to the same object, like same shape, same object. So these are technically two different objects, so we'll have to do it twice. Okay, and then let's go back. Let's do that to this window too. Add a slot, house light, and then just select the inside of the circle. Make sure you have house light selected and assign it. Alright, and then for this door, let's pull it out. Let's pull out the frame a little bit. See if that works. I'm gonna do G Shift Z, which means I'm just pulling against the horizontal axis. And I just want to make sure the light is seeping through the wooden gaps there. And I have to be careful because these panels are... So maybe we'll do this. We'll Control Z everything, select everything on this door. Make sure you have everything else deselected. So that's the 4 panels here, the frame, and then the window frame. And let's pull that out together. And the reason why I don't have light on, let me see if I can pull this out. Yeah. So now you can see light coming out from the gaps. It was just this mushroom base surface clashing with the door, so I had to pull it out slightly. Okay, once you've done that, let's move on to the next one. I realized that I haven't added the hex values for the rope or the this metal bar here. I think that's just black, but for the rope value, go ahead and select it, hit new, rename it, and this is the hex value. BE8166. That's BE8166 if you haven't done that already. And then for this one, let's do new. I'll just name this black. And we can just pull it all the way down. This one we will create. We'll just use the existing materials we've created. So mushroom base. Add a new slot, mushroom roof. And we're just going to select from the top. Again, that's Control plus if you want to increase selection, Control minus to decrease selection. I did play around with roughness for a few of these, like this metal bar. Perhaps this too. It's not as subtle, but most of the time it's just the default roughness. I like the look of the default clay-ish materials. And I found that leaving the roughness to 0.5, it helps achieve that look. The rocks I had to increase just to remove glossiness. But otherwise, they're pretty much the same roughness value. This roof, the chimney, this is also mushroom base. So let's just go ahead and change that to mushroom base. And then if we do have time at the end, let's add the bricks later. But I'm confident that you would know how to do this by now. Okay, now for the water. This one is the same default material. And when I was inspecting this before this session, I actually used a plugin to achieve this certain look with the details on this, which would take a lot of time to go through if I had to do it manually. So I won't create it exactly the same as this, but there is another way to do it, and we'll do it the short the short way. So let's just create a new material, name that water. And the water hex value is not there. I'll just add that in. So water is 58E6FF. And it might look a bit teal right now, but let's add transmission. So you're adding the water-like properties to it. That's transmission. And then from when I first learned 3D, I learned it from Polygon Runway. It's a course online. Feel free to check it out. But I've learned from there that the exact value for water for this value is 1.333. And I don't know exactly what this represents. I'm sure it stands for something. But that's basically how things are distorted when it's looked through from this layer. So later I'll show you in render preview what this looks like. But for now, just change it to 1.333. And then we'll also change the roughness to 0.05. Apparently that stands for index of refraction. Okay, so I think we've colored everything here. Oh, the snow I've left, but if you wanted to, feel free to add materials if you want. That's just white, so it can just be snow. And then when you add the base color, make sure you pull this up because the default base color is not fully white. So just pull it all the way up. And I guess we could do this quickly. Just select the snow, all the snow layers in the scene. And then just click on the snow layer that has the material applied and then link. Okay, now if we go to camera view, numpad 0, I think everything's colored. So now we're gonna go to rendered view. So if you hit Z, rendered, you can also change it with these tools here. And I'm gonna go ahead and change the render engine to cycles. So that's the second tab from the top, cycles. And I'm just gonna change mine to GPU because it's faster for me. And I'll just remove the hex off the screen since we're done with that part. So already it's looking pretty cool with the light in the window. I like to add lighting within the scene. I think it adds more depth to it. It like makes it more interesting. But for the main lighting of the scene, I'll show you the general process. Just reset your cursor to world origin. So that's Shift C, or you can do Shift S and just do this here. Okay, so from here, let's add a light source. Let's add an area light. And you won't be able to see it because it's added within this layer. And what I would do from here is I move it up on the Z axis by 10 or 15. In this case, I'll do 15. Ah, yes, I did. I forgot about this lamp light here. So go ahead and you can just easily do that. Click on mushroom base and change that slot to mushroom or house light. Thanks for the reminder, Adam. So that's, you have 3 lights here. Okay, so going back to the lighting, let me just refer to my original file. Okay, so for this one, let's change it to 4 meters. And you'll immediately realize that this is getting bigger. And you're just shedding light onto the whole scene in this direction. That's what this line means. And this is the surface that where you're projecting your light from. Okay, and then from here, let's change the color value. I haven't included the hex values for color for lighting, but you can just follow along. It's 4D9BFF. And maybe I'll just send a message in both Twitch and Discord. Okay, and then let's change that power to 1500. I think this is the most exciting step. It makes your render come to life. So once you've done that, let's rotate it. So what I'm planning to do is, for this light, I'm gonna shine it from the back side here, like so. So when I view it from the camera, I'll see a little bit of reflection on the water and the surface here. So let's do that. We're gonna rotate along the cursor. So hit period and do 3D cursor. So you're rotating around that. You can also achieve it by this tool here, this drop down. And let's do RX 45 degrees. And if you want to reverse anything, just hit minus on your numpad. And if you keep hitting plus or minus, then you'll notice that it just flips the orientation. So flip it to the back here. And then we're going to rotate it along the Z axis, RZ45. And it's going to shine on your scene like so. And this is all from the Polygon Runway course. But I think shining it from this angle has a few benefits. One is the shadow here. It kind of projects your silhouette shadow of the scene and projects it at the bottom. If it was in any other direction, it would look a little like it might look nice in some cases, but I think for me this looks the best. And then we'll tweak the settings a little bit to make the water more natural. For now, let's leave it like that. I'm just trying to think if I missed anything. No, I haven't. We might have to change the snow, the roughness of the snow. I think it's a little glossy for my taste. So I'm just gonna increase this to 0.75. It should apply to all of the snow layers, so just select one and change that. And then from here, let's change the shape of this to a disk. I tend to change the lights to the disk just so it looks more natural. Like if it was the sun in real life is circular and other lights look circular if you reflect them on a surface. So I tend to change it to disk. Makes it more natural. And then from here, It's just a matter of duplicating. So I'm just going to duplicate this and rotate it 90 degrees onto the left side. And then I'm going to duplicate this again, rotate it, and flip it over to the other side. So that's 180 degrees. You can duplicate it, hit R, Z, and then 180 on your numpad. And this way I found it's, if you have 3 light sources along, it lights up the scene evenly without just one sunlight. So if you had one sunlight, that works too, but I found that you have more flexibility if you have multiple light sources lighting up the scene. And then for the left one here, this one, make sure you select it. We're gonna change that to white. So I'm just gonna change it to FFFF. Immediately it becomes a bit more brighter. And I'm gonna change this to 750. So this will act as our global lighting of the scene. You notice immediately when I changed it to white, the whole scene kind of lit up. So white I use to light up the whole scene. Blue is to mimic a cold environment or nighttime environment. So you can, I'd see this as a nighttime environment because it's cold and blue, but there's a lot of warm lighting in the scene too, just to balance it out. And that's what I wanted to achieve. Like the base would be a cold color palette, but then we'll brighten this up with the yellow lighting of the house. And then there's also some lights that are hovering in the scene that are warmer, just to balance out the cold feeling to it. So let's go ahead and change this light on the right. That one is the warm lighting. So we're just going to change this to FFD BBF. FFD-BBF, and immediately becomes a bit brighter. This one will change to 500. I still do want the blue color palette to be dominant, so that's gonna be the weakest light source. And I'm gonna change the size to 8 for both this one and the global white light that we have here. So already it's looking pretty good, but I'm just gonna add a few more lighting to it to tweak it. The first one, we will add a light. You'll notice in the image here, there's a blue halo around the roof, and that's what I wanted to kind of emphasize the house, because that is the dominant object in the scene. So we'll just go ahead and add an area light. That's a new one. And then just move that up by 10, actually by 5. So let's do GZ5. And then let's change that color to a teal, 3D E4FF. (3D4FF), and then I'm gonna change the power to 3000. And obviously this is not what we want. It's in the wrong location. So we're just going to pull this up to about here. So when we do that, from the camera view, it's gonna seem like there's a halo around this house, but it's actually just a light source shining down on this point of the surface, and that will surround the house from the camera view. So let's just move this on the horizontal axes here, and once you move it up enough, it'll get to a point where you feel like it's achieving that same feeling. And I think I raised it too much, so let's place it down a little bit. We did 5 units above, so let's do 2.5 minus on the numpad and just half that height. And then from here, we're gonna move it along the horizontal again. Shift Z, and then just place it somewhere where it's emphasizing this object, this main house object. Okay, once you've done that, let's go ahead and create a few that will light up the scene in general. If you compare it with the image, it's close, but this scene looks a bit brighter than what we have right now. So we're gonna add a few lights in the scene. The first one we'll add above the pond just to brighten that up a bit. Let's do light area. And this one, let's raise it up by 2.5 units. GZ 2.5 on your numpad. And this one will follow the same light color from the halo that we just created. So just copy that hex value and then paste it into this one here. And then for this, let's change it to 500 and disk as well. We'll change the size to 2.5. And for this one, I'm gonna view it from the top. So that's numpad 7. And I'm just gonna move it over to here, somewhat in this location. So it's brightening up the pond, and that was intentional. I wanted to create a cold feeling around the pond because it's blue already. It's gonna be hard to balance that out. So just use a blue light. And then once you've done that, let's tweak the water a little bit. We're gonna mimic the waves on this. So go ahead and do edit. Go into edit mode for the water. And if you want, we can go to solid view. It might be faster for your computer to process. Go into solid, select all, and we're just gonna add a little bit more geometry before we start adding the ripples. So subdivide it once. And similar to how we created curves on the grass, we're gonna do that for the water surface too. So just select a few of these points. And again, before we do that, we're gonna go to wireframe view and hide the side layers so we don't affect those. So go to side view, make sure you include both levels here. And then hit H. We're gonna hide that. Go back to solid view. And just select a bunch of these. So hiding it will also make sure that you're not making changes to the hidden vertices. So you're just making changes to what's showing in the scene. Okay, once you've done that, let's turn on proportional editing. Go to random. And this is helpful for creating random curves on your surface. And I'm just going to bring this down. The higher the area of influence is, the more drastic your changes will be. And for water, I think it's okay to have it drastically different on the surface. So I'm just gonna go with something like this. And this is not the done state yet. We're going to add a subdivision surface just to balance the angles out. So add subdivision surface, increase it. I'm gonna shade smooth as well. And I actually like it that it's not completely flush to the ground here. Like there's a bit of bevel to the edges, and I think that's fine because water itself is a different material for the grass. So I don't mind it. Actually, if I could like pull this in even, that I think that would make it a bit more interesting. But what I would do is pull it down just so it kind of is level with the ground plane. And when you're doing that, make sure you pull this down too so you don't see the edge too much. You can do water through displacement. I just find the displacement tool a little bit less user-friendly. Like it's harder to understand how to use that. Versus this one, I think it's easier to understand, so I just do it through manual editing. But displace would totally work too. That's actually a better way to create random surfaces. I just don't prefer that method of doing it. And I'm just gonna pull these rocks down too. Okay, so I think it's looking pretty good. If I go back to rendered view, you'll notice the ripples now. If you did want to change how drastic those changes, like the ripples are, you would have to undo what we've just done, like create less ripples by decreasing the area of influence and then just moving it slightly. But I've decided to do it this way, and there's more ripples in my water. Okay, I think there's 2 light sources left. What I've done here is, at this point, when this was for a client, and client wanted to balance out the cold feeling of this scene, and that's why I've added warm lighting in the scene to balance it out a bit. So let's do that. This time we're gonna add a point light, and we're going to raise that by 2.5 as well. So GZ 2.5. And for this light, let's use this hex code. FFBD55. Hopefully that's legible on the stream. FFBD55. And then change the power to 100. And then from the top view, we're just gonna pull this over to the left side here. So somewhere in between the 2 trees and the rocks on the pond. And we'll also duplicate that, put it over here on the right side. So if I look at my view, it's looking pretty good. I think the power on these 2 are a little too bright, so let's pull it down to 50 instead. And you'll have to do this manually by selecting both. And then from here, I think it's just a matter of tweaking. So I think it's lacking a little bit of global light, and we can tweak the global white light to make it brighter. So let's try adding a bit more power to it. It does add a little bit of light. Another thing you could do is actually put this on the front of the render, like shining this way, and that would shine everything evenly. But again, like that would achieve a different sort of look and feel. It does light it up entirely, but for me, I actually prefer it a little bit more contrasty. So maybe what I'll do is I'll change this back to 750, and then maybe add another light source at the front. So I've just duplicated this white light, and I'm just going to rotate it 90 degrees so it's shining from the front this way. And then from here, this light will be, it did brighten up the whole scene, but I just want to make the one on the left brighter, just so the shadows on the trees and things like that, they exist, like the contrast should exist in the scene. Okay, I think that's it in terms of lighting and adding materials. From this point, if you wanted to render it, of course, it's render image, and that's gonna render out what you see in this camera view. And if I wanted to just preview what's in here, I can do Control B, select this box, and it'll just render the camera preview. So if I hit render image, that's gonna render out this box. If I wanted to change the resolution or the aspect ratio of this, you can do that by changing the numbers here. Now, when you do, it might be cropped in a weird way, so you would have to go back to object data properties and zoom out, in and out. But just to give you some tips on how I try to make my renders look a bit more interesting, I like to have a dynamic silhouette. So for this one, the trees actually make the silhouette of my scene very interesting. Also the house here. So there's more like ups and downs when you kind of draw a line around the scene, which I think is good. Another thing is even lighting. So how we've created 3 light sources from the start, and then adding a few more lights in the scene to balance it out. I think that's a way to do it. One more tip is I like to have one focal object in my scene. So that focal object, I think it's this, I kind of learned this when I was in art school, but your focal object should have more detail and more colors to it, so it stands out. So we've done that through like adding the door, the window, adding lights to it, adding spots to the roof, the snow, even these like snow details on the wood panel. That's intentional because you want to add as much detail as possible to this focal point. And then the rest of the scene, they're relatively less detailed. So that's a way to achieve like the viewer's attention to one certain thing. So the dominant object would be this, and that's where your eye goes immediately. But then you'll have room to see the other things afterwards. So like the small details here and there. I'm thinking this water is a little too detailed, so if I had to change anything, I would go back and change the ripples to be less detailed. But otherwise, I'm pretty happy with this. I would. It does look slightly different from the image reference, but that's okay. Let's just add a little bit, just one more detail to the chimney. It's not in the image reference, but I think it would be interesting to add some smoke coming out of it. So let's do Shift S, cursor to selected. And we're gonna use a new object called Metaball. If you go to Mesh, it's Metaball here. And just add ball. And let's increase the so this render value. Let's change it to 0.4. So resolution viewport is what you're seeing in the viewport, and then render is what you'll be seeing in the final image. And the reason why it's split is sometimes you want to preview on a lower setting so it doesn't take long to load the scene. So maybe you would want this to like 0.2, or sorry, the higher the number, it's less resolution. So you want it to be lower if you want it higher resolution. So the reason behind having render as a lower number, that makes sense because you want higher resolution in your final result. So just scale this down, bring it up, and let's position it so it seems like it's coming out of the roof. So pull it back slightly, and then from the camera view, it's looking pretty good. And then if you duplicate and bring it up, you'll notice it kind of connects from the original ball object, which is why we're using Metaball instead of just a sphere. And I'm gonna tweak this scale on the medium point, so that's period, to change the pivot point, and then scale it down. Let's move it out slightly. So I want it to seem like the smoke is going out to the left side and not straight up, because the chimney is actually angled at that angle. So let's add another one, bring it up. And from the camera view, it looks fine, but if you go into the scene itself, it might not. In this case, it worked perfectly actually, so I think we're good. And then for the final check, I like to toggle overlays off. And that just toggles off all the camera gizmos and the lighting objects. And you can focus on what you've created. And I'm pretty happy with this. We did miss a few steps, like the brick and the snow on the rock. I think those you can just create on your own. I'm pretty confident that you can at this point. The rock, you just have to duplicate a surface and then copy the same modifiers. For the brick, you need to create one brick object that's flat and then just snap it to the surface of the house. But yeah, that does add to giving more attention to this main object. Okay, any questions before we wrap this up? I think this will be the last session for this workshop. So we covered 3 renders, this one being the last one, over 7 weeks. It's quite a long time, and I know it's hard to commit to all 7, so appreciate you coming out to learn 3D. Hopefully this helped you, and hopefully you can take this knowledge, create your own renders. I will circle back with Nancy and Uju and see how we can improve the sessions. This was the first one, and it might have seemed a little less structured. But hopefully with our learnings, we're gonna improve it and come back. We will send out a survey to gather some of your feedback, so appreciate it if you would fill that out. Otherwise, is there any other questions? The client render, this was for they were launching some physical products that were alarms. So you know those alarms that you carry around in case you need to notify people around you. So you just pull a pin and that would let out like a high pitch siren. So they were launching that type of product, and this was promotional material on their socials to grab attention and promote that product. So that alarm product would look similar to these mushrooms. I actually had 3 characters in the scene, and those would be the alarms as well, but I've stripped that out because just to keep this more neutral for the course. Okay, if there aren't any other questions, thanks again for joining along on this 7-week journey. I know it's been a lot, but hopefully the recordings will help. Hopefully whatever you've learned you can take and create your own renders. And yeah, thanks for joining. I'll see you in the Discord or on our next Twitch stream.